This is the Hawley Hamlet group for Environmental 319. Our title is Quantifying Land Area for the Hawley Hamlet. I'm Parker Olson.
I'm Jenny Gilbert.
And I am Victoria Salinas.
So we started off with identification of the problems which were faced by Tim, which is our client for the Hawley Hamlet. We start with potentially inaccurate estimates of land. He was always going by the hand measurements, kind of by eye, by what plots usually are. So we went through and we measured all the growing, all the land, all the non-growing pollinators, stuff like that, so he could have accurate measurements so he wasn't just eyeballing it. The out of date and potentially inaccurate statistics for the public. This was more for his promotional gain. If he didn't have the most accurate statistics or he wasn't confident in them, he didn't have good faith in telling people things because he didn't have a lot to stand it by just by word, but now he has data written for him. Planning potential, this is for growing and various other things. If you know the exact land you're working with, you can better organize and plan the years to come. And then the desire to make this a model that other neighborhoods can follow. We kind of brought this up. He was thinking about it, but we kind of wanted to solidify the idea that we want this to become a template or a model for others so they can easily jumpstart it, and can just make it a thing. So then we have the background for nature and significance of the problem. Accurate measurements for planning, that was kind of stated before, but if you don't have accurate numbers, you can't plan. And so then you might overbuy, you might underbuy, you might not be able to give out as much as you think. It's just better to know exactly what you're working with. We wanted to show the public the extent of the hamlet, so we wanted to show how big it is, all that's in it, the amount of food that can be grown. If we can show all this, then it can help our cause and help people realize how much you can actually grow just from one block. With the more accurate numbers, the space can be used more efficiently. That kind of relates back to if you know what you're working with, you can just be more efficient because you know exactly what to do, what to buy. Um, and yeah, the more structured hamlet, that goes on again to making it for neighborhoods to follow. And then we come to why we should care. With environmental impacts, the benefits include utilizing environmentally friendly fertilizers and pesticides. That comes from Godman. Improving soil quality and reducing land and water use from Lugier. With the community, prior to the creation of the hamlet, Tim recalled not knowing any of his neighbors. Since then, he's established friendships and, at the very least, relationships with everyone on the block and the surrounding area. Research has shown that gardens strengthen community ties and increase neighborhood attachment, which encourages community investment and improvements. That comes from Comstock. Mental and physical health benefits. Mental health benefits for gardeners, along with greater fresh vegetable consumption compared with non-gardeners, and lower consumption of sweet foods and drinks. That comes from Armstrong. And that can definitely, if you know what you're growing, you know what you're eating. With World War II, Victory Gardens became a vital source of fresh vegetables in America, supplying 40% of fresh vegetables consumed in the U.S. from about 20 million gardens. That just goes to show how much we actually could do if we decided to. And then while Tim emphasized the benefits of fresh produce in the case of lowered food supply or emergency, gardens may also prove to be beneficial in increasing fresh produce and increasing accessibility to fresh foods in food deserts when planned correctly. And that comes from Wayne.
So here we have outlined some of our specific objectives, starting with gathering the thorough measurements of the land located within the Hawley Hamlet. Then we will double check and review these land measurements to ensure accuracy. And our third objective is using the collected data. We'll represent it through 3 different criteria. And that criteria is the total usable area, the growable area, and then finally the pollinator area. And then continuing on, those measurements will be utilized to produce calculations, analysis, and evaluation of the collected data. And finally, the results and conclusions will be shared with our client, Tim, and presented to the community. So just to go over a little bit of our specific methods, we first off conducted some physical measurements of the land outside. So most of the time it was all four of us, including Parker, Victoria, myself, and Tim. But occasionally there were two of us, but we made sure that it was accurate and efficient. After we had those physical measurements, we would take those inside and we would conduct a thorough analysis of the data. And so the way that we did that was through calculations, documenting, and finally double checking these calculations. So we would all kind of establish this task force and guarantee that what we were calculating through the data was an articulate representation of the Hawley Hamlet. And you can see on the right, that shows a picture of some of the specific calculations that we did and kind of represents how we were documenting our work along the way. Okay, and so then to just present some of the results. So as I said, we broke it down into 3 different measurements. First of all, the total usable area would be all of the area that we measured within the Hawley Hamlet. And so this totaled to 39,624.5 square feet, which we then kind of used the data to calculate how much of an acre that would be, and it came out to be 91% of an acre, which is equivalent to 82.6 yards of a football field. And so that's just kind of another way to visualize it, that the amount of land within the Hawley Hamlet is 2/3 of a standard size American football field. So that is quite a bit of land, and that is more land than Tim had previously estimated. So this is a much more accurate depiction. Secondly, we broke it down by growable area, and this specifically was about 8,665 square feet. And then finally, our third representation of the land was through pollinator area. And so this was land that was specifically set aside with pollinator plants to attract pollinators. And this was figured out to be about 10,956.5 square feet.
Okay, so we already talked about how we addressed some of the problems, the first few problems that he had. I was thinking about some of the other problems he had with making it more organized and really making it the best that it could be so that it can be replicated by other people who want to establish gardens. And I found some things that other people have done to make their gardens more organized. So one of those things is to make a committee. This doesn't have to be super formal. I know that Tim has had issues with people being inconsistent with their contributions. Some people may not be able to contribute in every way. So for example, I know that there's a couple who are very old and they can't contribute physically, but they might be able to contribute in other ways. I think Tim would have a really good idea of like what's needed and how he can give everybody different responsibilities. But for example, for the old couple, they could go around and discuss what people are wanting to plant and collect that information. Another thing that could be very helpful is to organize events. I think a lot of problems with things like this is that people have trouble maintaining excitement and energy. So if you organize events and had maybe like a day in the beginning of the growing season where everybody comes together and the neighborhood meets together almost like a block party, and they help and they bring people who might not even live in the neighborhood, people who might not regularly participate, but you could increase a lot. I think you could really increase investment and get a lot of things done, and people can really come together and get to know each other. Another thing that you could do is establish partnerships. So this could be a variety of things. This could be clubs, this could be senior centers, this could be church groups. This would provide lots of help and people, but you also could get donations and funding. This doesn't have to be like a big thing, but for example, you can find like a group that might be willing to donate seeds. And even though the focus of this garden is really for the best of the neighborhood, this would also be really beneficial in that you could educate a lot of people on the importance of neighborhood gardens and maybe inspire them, and maybe they could start their own. In addition, having these partnerships, they could overlap with events. So an example of this could be horticulture club could have an event where every maybe first Saturday of April they spend all day at the Hamlet and plant a lot of seeds and get a ton done and just eat food and socialize, and it can be a really fun thing that they look forward to. So another problem that we didn't quite get to address is mapping of the garden. Right now Tim really uses like hand-drawn maps, and even though we couldn't make a GIS map, I don't really think it requires like GIS and a semester's worth of class to map this garden. Even though Tim kind of struggles with computers, I think he would have a lot of people who would be willing to help him out. So Rachel Arsenault from Grow a Life has mapped her own garden, which you can see on the right in that image. And you can get as complicated or as simple as you want. So a resource on how to map your garden using Excel is in this link right here, from Ever Changing Gardener, and they use Excel. Theirs is a little bit more intense. It seems very organized and has everything there, but it doesn't have to be. It could be relatively simple. You could use more than one source. You could have your Excel in your garden and maybe use like a Word document and have like a legend. Another example is, since Tim likes to do things by hand, Blake's School Garden made a hand-drawn garden, but I think it might be a good idea to print off maybe the garden from Excel, maybe laminate it, and then instead of just entering things in computer, you could maybe use sticky notes that you could change things every year, and if you maybe had some like permanent change in the garden, you could just go back and like fix it and make a minor change. But after you've done that initial garden mapping, it would be pretty simple to put everything in there and to make little changes. Okay, so our overall recommendations are to create roles and delegate responsibilities, pursue educational opportunities within the community, seek and establish partnerships, organize fun events and productive events, make a better map that is sustainable and won't get lost, and have a stronger online presence, because I think a lot of people could be reached through social media and a lot of people would be really excited to see what the Hawley Hamlet is doing.